Hello all, Shurue here, back again with another comic book collection update video. This time for the month of August of 2017. Now, for those of you who have not been following me regularly for the past few months, I have been devoting all of my time to the DC books that I've been collecting because I've been very behind. Thanks to foolishly buying into Civil War II hardcore. And as a result, I ended up being behind on my DC books by over a year. At least it feels like it's been over a year. Anyway, thanks to a lot of things, I was able to, for the most part, catch up. Now, because of when I got the books, there are going to be a few issues here and there that I do not yet have, just because they weren't out at the time that I went to pick up the books, but they're out now. And I will be picking those up when I go to the comic shop this month. But anyway, I also actually have one Marvel book in the stack. I'm going to be doing the stack a little bit differently in this video, just because of how many books I got for each series. So first I'm going to go through the series where I only got one book for it. Starting off with JLA number 9. Yeah, it's really hard for me to remember because it's been hard to keep track of this one as far as tracking down the issues, because the release schedule got really weird. And because for those of you not aware, this JLA run is a series that takes place in between arcs for the New 52 Justice League series, without actually being a part of that series. So it's really weird in that regard. It had a really weird release schedule, which threw me off there. It wasn't too popular, so it was hard for me to get a hold of the books, but I did really enjoy the story. The story was about basically the Justice League's interactions with a guy who referred to himself as Rao, and his history with Krypton and his interactions with Earth. And it was an interesting scenario. To my knowledge, we've never seen that before. I know I haven't. At least not in this particular instance. We got to see some interesting sides to Clark. How he was on board at one point while everyone else was very suspicious, but then by the end, and well, by the end I mean by right now, by this point, because this isn't the end of the series, he's more devoted to stopping Rao than anyone else. Not to say that the others aren't, but yeah, it's been a fun series. It's been an interesting, engaging, and fun series, and I think I actually already have issue 10, so I'm going to be getting around to that pretty soon. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. But I've already shown you guys that comic in another video, so this will probably be the last JLA coverage that my channel gives. Anyway, moving on. We have the one and only Marvel book in my stack. This book was actually given to me by the owner of my comic shop. He thought that I kind of feel bad about this. He thought I'd enjoy the book, so he gave it to me for free. Kingpin number 1. I did like the story. I do like the premise and the concept. But I don't like the main character. The main character just feels disinteresting and boring. I think I think, because the whole point of this book is, this issue anyway, is that Kingpin recruits this reporter to write his story. Officially, it's supposed to be unbiased, honest look. And I think that would have been a more interesting story, you know, from a comic book perspective, from a narrative perspective. I think it would have been more interesting if, instead of spending an entire issue recruiting a character that we have no time to really get to know or really give a damn about, if instead Kingpin just wrote it himself. Because he's got such an ego, and he's so full of himself that I could easily see him saying, yeah, I'm going to write it myself, but because it's the truth, people will believe it. And because I am great, people will listen. Even though people are terrified of me, he has such a high opinion of himself. I could easily see him thinking that he could pull that off himself. And the dichotomy there would have been a lot more entertaining than the author that they get in the book. Now, maybe the rest of the series is good. I don't know. But as you can see, or maybe you can't, this issue was $5.40. It's a lot of money for a single issue. Now, that is a number one. That is true. But these comics are expensive. Marvel books in particular are known for being expensive. And I don't want to dabble in Marvel books unless I'm really enjoying them. There's a possibility of Marvel series that I had been collecting in the past that I drop when I tackle my Marvel backlog, which I will be starting in the month of September. But yeah, so that's Kingpin number one. Next up is a book that I never would have bought on my own. I never would have noticed it. I never would have cared, if not for the recommendations of people like Diversity in Comics. You have Mr. Miracle number one. I wasn't a huge fan of this issue, if I'm being totally honest. To go against the grain, to be that guy. I definitely understand. I definitely get it. I understand why it's as popular as it is. It just isn't that interesting to me. The story in the book itself. Now, the plot being presented with Darkseid and Orion and all that situation, that's interesting, and that is why I'm going to be continuing on with the book, because the entire thing going on with Darkseid and the New Gods right now is actually interesting to me, and I do want to see more of that, and you're actually going to see a little bit more of that in another series that I will be covering in this video as well, much later. But yeah, that's the situation with Mr. Miracle. Next up, we have the first the first DC series that I actually caught up with that stayed on my pull, Trinity, number 11. Now, this issue set up a third Trinity, if I remember correctly. Is that what happened? No, they finished that's right, they finished the Dead Space thing. And they actually made it they made it more interesting. I'll admit that. They did make the Dead Space thing that I talked about in the last video more interesting. I do care more. I was interested by the end. They added enough detail and depth and complexity to the situation to pique my interest. Now, it's still a little weird that after that, with 2 dangling plot threads, they went and did something new that only lasted 2 issues, but it was still fun. And I did like it. It was a step up from issue 10, which was jarring. Alright, next up we have... We're moving away from the 1 issue stuff, and we're now hitting the the only mini. I could consider this parts of 2 different series, but because of the way they're written, it really works better to treat it like a mini. I'm talking, of course, about The Button, part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. Unfortunately, I was not able to get the lenticulars, but I did really, really like The Button. Feel bad for this guy right here. Still lost in time. But I did really like The Button. I know there are people who didn't. I know there are people who kind of feel cheated because of how small the thing was. Because we all thought that The Button was going to be the next chapter in the thing that started with Rebirth. And I mean, it technically is, but it's really small. It is, and it's really truncated, but it's more like an interlude. It's more of an interlude, and it's also more of a sequel to Flashpoint than to Rebirth. Although there are definitely things that continue from Rebirth as well. But I still liked it. It was still fun, it was still interesting. They brought things up that I didn't think they would, or at least I didn't think they would have prior to it coming out. I had a lot of it spoiled for me going in. But there are still things in there that I would not have thought they would have done. Like bringing in Jonathan Wayne from Flashpoint. And him telling Bruce not to be Batman. That was rough. That was... wow. How do you deal with that? And Bruce is struggling to deal with that as a result, as he should. Yeah, the Flash series was definitely more impacted by The Button than Batman was, at least narratively. The Batman book narratively is interesting, and we'll get to that when we get to it in the pile here. But moving on from the minis and the one-offs, we have Aquaman 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. Now, I'm going to divide this. Well, those are really, it's the same arc, really. So first you have H2O stuff. I liked H2O. It was very small scale compared to what we usually have, but it was some good character stuff. It was definitely an interlude arc, but it's a heck of a lot better than things we've seen from other books with interlude arcs, like, say, Superman, who just decided to teleport Superman and his son to Dinosaur Island randomly, and then bring them back with nothing to show for it. This actually had weight and consequence involved. Not much. It was, again, very small scale, but it worked, considering the war we just came away from, and the ridiculous amount of politicking that this book is known for. So that was a nice breather, really. Speaking of politicking, then we have, I put the Underworld arc in with Crown of Atlantis because it really is the same arc for all intents and purposes. Debating whether or not I want to talk about this. I do like the story. I do. And if... There we go again. I feel like in some spots, just with not with the book as a whole, and not with like I'm not saying this is an SJW title, not by a long shot, but there are definitely moments where buzzwords are thrown around. Now, the words make sense in their context, and they're not the typical political context. And there is no clear narrative trying to be pushed by it, so that's nice. But at the same time, again, the story itself is good, but the timing of it just makes it hard to read. I feel like 10 years from now, if this story had come out 10 years ago, or 10 years from now, I would not have had a problem reading it. It would have just been a fantastic story that would have given me everything that I was looking for and everything I wanted out of the Aquaman book, and I would have just been enjoying it the whole time. Instead, I felt like I was walking on eggshells the whole time. No, eggshells is the wrong word. Walking through a minefield the whole time, just waiting for something to blow up in my face. And in a way, I still kind of am. Because, well, it wouldn't be the first time that happened in comics. And I'm scared because I do like this book. I like this book and I like what it's doing, but it's playing a dangerous game. And while it is really good, it could go really bad really fast. And I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't. Wow. Almost 20 minutes in, and I don't even think I'm halfway through the stack. Anyway, moving on, we're going into the Batman run now. First we have Batman the Brave and the Bold. Arguably the only book in the Batman title that actually ties into the Button in any real sense. It's also very odd in its standalone nature. It doesn't really have anything to do with what's come before in the run as a whole, it's really weird given the nature of what this Batman run has been like up to this point, right? Everything has tied into everything, and everything has built up to, I Am Bane and what I'm going to be talking about next. And then you have Brave and the Bold, which has nothing to do with anything. It could be argued that it has connections to the Button, but those connections are weak at best, and that's all it's got. The book itself is well written to some extent, but it also presents Batman as really emotional. Which I don't know if that's exactly how he would act in that given circumstance. I mean, it's a competent story, and it's a good introduction to Swamp Thing for the people that don't know him. But outside of that, I don't see the point of it. I don't see the point of it, especially since everything even tangentially related between Brave and the Mold and the Button is done exactly the same and yet better in every way by every epilogue as a prelude. It's the exact same idea, done better in every way. You got Batman doing what Batman's been doing for decades, teaching younger heroes how to stand on their own, and it's tying directly into, well, directly, not directly, more indirectly, but it is tying into his interactions with Thomas Wayne in The Button in a much more interesting way, and it culminates in a character event at the end of the book that was handled really well. Next, we have a situation in Batman that I'm of two minds on. We have The War of Jokes and Riddles, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now, the thing about The War of Jokes and Riddles, The War of Jokes and Riddles is a really random thing in this context, because, again, up until now, all of the stories have tied directly into the run itself. Now, I don't doubt for a second that at the end of this run, at the end of this story, something is going to happen to tie it in. That is very likely to happen. Tom King's been, again, doing this the entire time. But it was still weird to suddenly say, okay, we've been doing this forward progression this whole time. Let's go back now and tell a story that is the sequel to Year One. Which is a really random thing to do, but okay. It took me a bit to get into it. I'm really glad that I wasn't just reading it one issue at a time, like 1 or 2 issues a month, and instead just reading all of it in one go, because I think I would have lost interest if I were to be reading this piecemeal, because it just seems so far to have so little, and in fact nothing, to do with what's happening in the book right now. But I did enjoy it. I did get to read this much of it, and I'm definitely into it now. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it continue. Now, next up we have The Flash, The Color of Fear, Parts 1 and 2, which I'm of two minds on. You know, on the one hand, I mean, I do like this book a lot. I like the way the characters are written, I like the way they're presented, I like the way they're drawn. I don't often talk about art because I don't typically care, but yeah, I do like the art in this book. And I like the story. Again, I like the storytelling. I like everything about it in general. You know what? I just realized. The Color of Fear. Yeah, all of this. Running Scared. And really, this is an issue of Negative as well. And Negative, it's all really one arc. And it's an arc I don't like. You know, it does the cliched thing. What I have liked most, what Rebirth has done best, when Rebirth is at its best, it is taking established characters and established dynamics and taking things that we are familiar with and doing the unexpected with them. You know, who expected the Superman book to turn into the Fantastic Four equivalent. That's really weird and interesting. It's a unique perspective, and the Flash has been doing something similar. You know, it did what actually. It's not the only book that's doing this. Supergirl did this as well for mixed results. But The Flash took the TV show, chipped away all of the negative aspects, and we come out with an awesome book. And I really like it. But now all of a sudden we're leaning on cliches. All of a sudden things have to go bad. And now all of a sudden he's lost everything because he didn't tell his girlfriend his secret identity. What a shock. Haven't seen that before. Yeah. It's boring. The whole idea has been done to death so many times. And all I can hope for at this point is that we can just get away from this as quickly as possible and get on with actually telling the story. Similarly, we have Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. I said this was probably going to happen. I also said I really wouldn't like it if they did, but it happened. The split between the green and yellow corps happened, and it was really dumb and really stupid. Really made everything beforehand feel like a waste as far as potential. Hopefully it'll be revisited and they actually do something with it. But based on what this book here is presented, it seems instead like they just want to move on and focus on the current DC event, which is the Metal event. I'm pretty sure this ties into the Metal event and the New Gods. Or I know it ties into the New Gods. Orion shows up, but I'm pretty sure. I don't know much about the Metal event. Unlike the Button, I know next to nothing about the Metal event, so I don't know if it has anything to do with the New Gods. But this book made it look like it was. So yeah, it looks like they're just trying to move on from that point, when that point was easily the most interesting part of the book. So I hope we get back to it. I hope we manage to fix that situation, and things can actually continue to be unique and interesting instead of resuming the status quo that has been around for ages upon ages. Now it feels like it's a little weird, because books that I usually praise, books that I usually really like, I didn't like all that much this month. Meanwhile, you've got books like Action Comics, which I have actually been more on the negative side than positive as far, in general, comparatively to the other series that I collect. Just for things like the cover not being accurate or the storytelling being really slow. But the Revenge story arc in particular has been really good. I really liked it. The whole Superman war, which is basically what this is, was really interesting and really fun. I do wish John had gotten a few more hits in. I do wish he had been more involved. But he did get some hits in. He still got involved to some extent. My one complaint, it seemed to end on a cliffhanger of sorts, and then this book happened, which seemed to ignore said cliffhanger, unless it's addressing the cliffhanger in a very very roundabout way, which is not impossible. It's not. But I can't help but feel like I'm missing a book. Like, does Lex Luthor have his own title and I just don't know it? Because things are happening around him that seem pretty important right now, and they weren't addressed in this book. At all. When 984 made it look like they were going to be. So I have no idea. I have no freaking clue what's up with that. I did like the book. I did like 985. I'm struggling to remember it right now, which is odd. I've been reading a lot today. I do remember enjoying it. I don't remember anything in particular standing out about it, as far as being negative. In general, I'm just glad to be caught up on my DC stuff. I'm not going to be covering the Superman books in this video, like the Superman title in this video. I am caught up on that title, but I forgot. I missed one issue that was farther back. I missed issue 21, and so it's hard for me to just to skip that and read 22 onward. So what I'll do instead is I'll pick up 21 in the next month, and I'll just cover the Superman books when that happens. So outside of that, that's it. That concludes my comic collection update video, my comic haul for the month of August of the year 2017. Feels really good to be caught up on DC stuff. And now comes Marvel. See you next time, guys.